will accompany this task.
Your decisions have determined who will represent you in Parliament, and it is now our responsibility to ensure that the new Parliament carries your aspirations and hopes for a better future.
Meanwhile, coalition talks continue to take place as political parties have 14 days since the declaration of the results to take their seats. Kani Mapanga, SABC News, Johannesburg.
Chief Justice Raymond Zondo says the period between the inauguration of the president and swearing in of ministers is a good time to consider the model of the separation of powers. He was speaking at the official handover ceremony of the lists of members of parliament and provincial legislatures. The ceremony followed Sunday's announcement of the final election results. Zondo says different models of the separation of powers are used in the world. In South Africa, the separation of powers refers to the division of power between the three pillars of government, namely the legislature, executive and judiciary, where each keeps watch over the power of the others.
This time between a general election such as the one that we have just had and the inauguration of the president and the swearing in of the deputy president and the ministers and deputy ministers before they can begin to perform their duties is one of the perfect times to have a look at our model of the separation of powers. When the Constitutional Court dealt with the question in the certification case whether or not the separation of powers, which had been contemplated by the principles that guided the drafting of the Constitution, had been complied with in putting together or drafting our Constitution. One of the things that they did was to look at various models throughout the world of separation of powers. And this court concluded that there is no one model that applies throughout, and that we in South Africa have our own model that would continue to develop as the courts developed our jurisprudence. Now, between the general election and the inauguration of the president and the swearing in of the ministers, what you will see is that the Chief Justice, a member of the judiciary, the head of the judiciary, convenes the first sitting of Parliament.
Let's go back to one of our top stories for tonight. The ANC National Executive Committee is still locked in tense discussions as they debate whether the party should go into a coalition with erstwhile political rivals or pursue a government of national unity. And for the latest update, we are now joined by our politics editor, Mzwandile Mbeche, who has spent most of his day at the Birchwood Hotel in Boksburg. And Mzwa, one would say that we were expecting some sort of an announcement from the ANC president from as well as 6 p.m. this evening. It's 9 o'clock. Are we likely to see this address by the president of the ANC?
Well, a very good evening to you, Mbali. As you see me looking behind there, I don't know how far the camera can go in terms of showing you what is happening there in terms of the activity. I know it's dark now, but basically what you see, if you are able to see anything, so those are the reporters, the journalists and the camera people. So we have been called to walk into that room. That is where the NEC members are sitting. So that basically means, Mbali, that the president of the ANC is going towards closure in terms of addressing the NEC members, then he will then speak to us to communicate the outcomes of what has been transpiring here. We understand that there are several options on the table in terms of the approach towards forming government. The first one is the national government of the government of national unity, and then of course the coalition. So those are some of the priorities or the aspects that have been put on the table. And in terms of reaching out to other political parties, you'd recall that earlier we had been informed that the ANC had not spoken to MK, but we can confirm that there have been some engagements of sorts at an informal level between the ANC and the MK party, so which basically tells you that the wheel is now in motion. We don't know what the ANC will be telling us, but in a matter of minutes, perhaps we will get to know, because they have just told us that we need to get in there. And the president of the ANC will then communicate those decisions, or rather the nature of the discussions, because remember, whatever they decide here, it's not really final, so it's something that they will take to other parties, and then the other parties will also engage. The ANC is important in this instance because it is the majority in terms of the parties that came out of the elections, but none of the parties that contested was able to then get more than 50%. So it got 40%, I think the second got 21, the third 14, and the fifth and the fourth got 9.5. So those matters inform the nature of the discussions that are happening here. So in the next few minutes, I'm not going to be long, Mbali, because we don't know, so the media is already working in there. So I'm just going to finish it up here and then hope that the president will then speak to the media, of course, speaking to South Africans through the media, communicating exactly the ANC's position or the approach towards coalition or the government of national unity.
And before I let you go, Bzwai, I mean, you speak about the MK party, and we saw that statement coming out this evening, and subsequently that discussion taking place with my colleague Clement Manyatala, saying that there have been engagements. But does this now throw a spanner in the works when it comes to coalition talks that have been held for much of today?
Well, what it basically does, remember, there are so many options on the table, and I think the approach of the ANC is basically to bring everyone on board, because we've never been here before. This is the first time we are here since 1994, and I think having seen how coalitions work in local government municipalities, they certainly don't inspire confidence. You probably will look for something else now that the parties or South Africans decided that no one is getting the outright majority. So that is why it's so important to hear what the ANC is saying, because this is what it will be taking to other parties. Whether the other parties will buy it, it's something quite interesting. We already know that a party like the Democratic Alliance, for example, has said they don't want to work with a party like the EFF and the MK. But if the ANC comes with a model that is different from the coalition, so you would find that it can accommodate everyone, so not necessarily a classic coalition. Because even the DA, which appears a bit more willing to work with the ANC, there is a serious pushback from certain sections of the ANC in regard to having a coalition with the DA. So all those matters really inform what is happening here. But Mbali, we just have to go. I'll just have to cut it here. All
right, Mzwa, I don't want to keep you any longer. You can head back inside so that we can finally hear from the ANC President Cyril Ramaphosa there when it comes to the decisions which have been taken at that special NEC meeting which has been underway for much of today. Let's continue with that story. ANC Secretary General Fikile Mbalula says the protest outside the Birchwood Hotel in Boxburg, where the party's National Executive Committee is meeting, is unfortunate and misplaced. Mbalula says the ANC continues to engage with all political parties in an effort to form a government of national unity. He says, however, they have still not made progress in engaging the Umkhonto weSizwe party on coalition talks. Mbalula confirmed that efforts to speak to party leader Jacob Zuma drew a blank. The ANC-NEC will be deliberating and making a decision on how it will constitute a government. President Cyril Ramaphosa is expected to make a closing address this evening.
The protest is protesting on the basis of disinformation because the ANC have never said that is going into coalition with the DA. The question of the framework, strategic framework, is going to look into the outcome of the elections. And the outcome of the elections, as we all know, does not favor the ANC. And in this instance, we did outline that we're talking to everyone. Who, in terms of the leaderboard, it is quite clear in terms of the significant numbers that they've received. The message from South Africans, as outlined by the president, is very clear: work together. So we don't have outright majority. Even in this instance, we have lower numbers. Yesterday, Mahlengi would have given you a report that says the flavor of our engagement with political parties. And we have engaged with everybody, and we're still talking to even others, even smaller parties, because we want to bring everybody on board, because South Africans want us to work together for their sake. And we have said, as the ANC, we will prioritize the people. We don't want instability. We want a stable government. Also, we have got keen interest in terms of seeing through our manifesto being implemented. What these 6 million people of South Africa have voted for. They voted for continuity of the ANC. They voted for more jobs. They voted for the expansion of social protection. They've voted for growth and jobs for the economy and all of that. So that is what really is important for South Africa going forward. And so the protest, it's unfortunate and is really misplaced because this is a time for sober minds.
The ANC's alliance partner, COSATU, has rejected a possible coalition with the Democratic Alliance. It accuses the main opposition party of working against the improvement of workers' rights. The Trade Union Federation says this includes the introduction of a basic minimum wage. COSATU's General Secretary, Soli Petwe, says they are prepared to work with any political party that will protect the rights of workers. Petwe also rejected a possible coalition with the Umkhonto weSizwe party.
As a labor organization, in particular COSATU, representing over 1.5 million, we will never agree. We reject a coalition with DA, and our reasons, few of them, even if we may not be able to say all of them here, but one of them is that we don't think that we would allow that on the basis that DA has went publicly to say the workers in this country, they've got too many labor rights, therefore the labor rights must be reduced to nothing. In fact, from what they are saying is that they would want to take us back to before 1994. They've also made some statement and a public announcement even yesterday that they, whether they're in coalition with the ANC or they're in government or not, or they want to work together in the government, the government national of unity, they are going to continue with their attack to take the issue of the national health insurance in court. You will recall that immediately after May Day, on the 2nd of May, DA picket at COSATU House, demanding that COSATU must work with them to reject the national minimum wage. It means that they're saying the vulnerable workers who are under attack must go back to the 6 rand per hour after 1994, after 30 years in democracy. They are not supporting any policies that advance the agenda of the workers and the working class in this country. Therefore, as COSATU, we would agree to work with any political party with coalition, the ANC, that will protect the labor laws, social wages, and make sure that there's an investment in the working class communities.
Yeah.
We will not work with the DA. That we want to make it very clear to the public. Our farm workers, as we speak, 2 days ago, I had to go to the farm areas where one of the white person dismissed 360 workers for going to go and exercise their rights to vote. They don't even know whether those workers voted for ANC or they voted for DA. But just because those workers, it was a public holiday, they went to go and vote, and DA said nothing. They never rejected or condemned that. Again, just before election, a worker was maluted and killed by pit bulls that belongs to a white person. DA never said anything. Therefore, tells you that the workers under the government of DA, it will be nothing.